Earlier this spring, Aaron Rodgers suggested he may play another 4 seasons. Now, whether that actually happens, time will tell. Obviously, Robert Saleh is going to be the head coach in 2024, and Nate Hackett will be the offensive coordinator again. From everything we've seen and heard up to this point, Rodgers has been complimentary of Saleh, and Saleh has obviously endorsed Aaron since all of this came together in the 2023 offseason. I know the unexcused absence is what grabbed the headlines earlier this spring, but I don't see that as important as what I just mentioned with Rodgers' declaration that he has more seasons, plural, left in the tank, including potentially multiple seasons after 2024. But if this season does not go well, what happens after 2024? What I originally took from that statement was, could this be Rodgers angling to perhaps get a say on the next coach? Because that time frame he offered was somewhat vague. It was something along the lines of 2, 3, 4 years. And if we look at it as 4 years, starting this season in 2024, those 4 seasons would be this year, next year, 2026, 2027. That is a long time from now. Let's assume for the sake of this conversation, 2 or 3 seasons would be more likely. So 2024, 25, 26. If 2024 is subpar, it's likely the Jets move on from Saleh. He was hired on a 5-year contract prior to the 2021 season. So we are entering the 4th year of that deal. Stating the obvious, when the Jets hired him, there was no assumption that Aaron Rodgers was going to eventually become their quarterback. Rodgers had just won the MVP in 2020, and then in Saleh's first year as the Jets coach, Rodgers won it again in 2021. There was zero indication he was the future quarterback for the Jets. But when you look at this past season, and it flies under the radar a little bit because of the injury, this Jets dynamic is really the first time in Rodgers' pro career that the head coach is a defensive guy. And you could probably even extend that all the way back to the Cal days with Jeff Tedford when he was at Berkeley. Mike Sherman was the Packers head coach when Rodgers was drafted in 2005. And so during the entire 18 seasons he was in Green Bay, and more specifically, during the majority of his time as the starter, Rodgers saw a grand total of 2 head coaches come into the organization, Mike McCarthy and then Matt LaFleur. But with this Jets trade, it created a situation where Aaron Rodgers was now the new guy. He went into the Jets org where the GM, head coach, the offensive star, the defensive star, had been established prior to his arrival. The reason I look at this timing is due to what Rodgers went to New York to do in the first place. The media and all the talking heads on the internet, we can have our opinions. The reality is those opinions will have no influence on Rodgers and or the Jets in terms of the decision-making moving forward. For me, I think this is 100% on the Jets to both manage this personnel situation and the cap hits accordingly. You cannot take short positions on your best young players. Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner are the best young players the Jets have had since as far back as I can remember. The fact that they were both taken top 10 in the 22 draft gave the Jets a unique opportunity, no doubt. They have a couple of guys that are among the very best in the entire league, and they are only entering year 3. The reason I mention Gardner and Garrett Wilson is I think there is going to be an interesting situation about, call it 8 months from now. There is zero question as to whether the Jets will be picking up the 5th years on these guys, which they have to do by early May of 2025. That is absolutely going to happen. The numbers get large when you consider what the going rate will be for receiver and corner extensions going into next offseason. I actually think the Jets will work to get both Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner's new contracts done sooner than later. I will say at minimum, at least one of them signs an extension by next spring. The Jets certainly do not have to do that, but I could see that happening as it is technically better for the team, both in terms of total dollars and the flexibility they have with the cap hits. It's also a huge amount for the player and a nice signing bonus. The way the money is now for top end receivers and corners, I think both guys are looking at 100 million plus in contract extensions in the next couple of years. And for the Jets, with the way the salary cap increases each year and the potential for some other team to give their receiver or corner a big deal and set a new precedent, you may be saving anywhere from, call it 3 to 5 million in average annual value simply because of the timing. Let's say they waited all the way until the 2026 offseason, which would be headed into the final year on the contract. Remember, the fifth year is fully guaranteed. What if by the time they go to sign Garrett Wilson, there are multiple wide receivers making close to 40 million a year? Remember, we still need to see where CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase come in at on their new deals. I would put Brandon Ayuk right up there, with that group in terms of what the money's going to look like. So the risk the Jets run is if they were to kick the can on a new deal for Garrett Wilson, that will likely result in a significant amount of money, more money, I should say, that they then have to pay him whenever the extension is offered. And in a hard cap sport, you cannot afford to mismanage the money allocation. So we'll see, but I actually think sooner rather than later is the best for the Jets on these two guys. So let's get back to Rodgers and why I went off on that Garrett Wilson Sauce Gardner tangent. I do not expect in any way what the Jets or that the Jets would put Saleh in the situation that the Dallas Cowboys have put Mike McCarthy in for 2024. Mike McCarthy, who we thought was likely coaching for his job last year, is going into the lame duck year of his contract this upcoming season. That is not the conventional approach when it comes to head coaching contracts, and I truly do not see this being a trend going forward, just to be clear. So consider 2024 to be the deciding factor in whether or not Robert Saleh is extended beyond this year. So given that set of circumstances, we are going into 2024. Again, if Aaron Rodgers is serious about playing multiple seasons, we go into this season where either the Jets are going to be successful and Saleh gets an extension, meaning he's with the Jets, 2025 and several years beyond, or we go into an offseason where the Jets are going to be in the market for a new head coach. And if that were to be the case, it brings a lot of uncertainty. If you are the Jets, you have given up capital to acquire Aaron Rodgers. And up to this point, you are losing that trade. Now, obviously, no one saw Rodgers suffering a season-ending injury 4 plays into the season, but as far as the ratio of what they traded against what they have gotten back, the Jets are in the red. That is a fact and simply where we are at right now. So 2024 is a make-or-break year, both as it pertains to Rodgers and what the Jets do with the head coach. As of right now, Aaron Rodgers, air quotes, team-friendly deal has him counting as $37.5 million against the cap for the 2025 season. So he is already on the books beyond this season. Therefore, I think it's safe to say, at minimum, we can infer the Rodgers-Jets marriage is going to continue at least into 2025. And if he looks good this upcoming season, I would assume they rework his deal to reduce the cap hit for 2025, where they're able to spread that money out against the cap I'm talking about over multiple seasons. The reason I say against the cap is a player counting against the cap in a given year does not necessarily mean that player is actually playing for the franchise in that year. See Wilson, Russell, Denver Broncos. But based on this trade and the way the contract is structured, I do not see how this doesn't result in at least 3 Aaron Rodgers Jet season, meaning 24, 25, 26. Now let's talk about the money question for Saleh and whoever the next head coach might be. Let's assume, hypothetically, the Jets either extend Saleh or search for a new coach. Head coaching contracts continue to increase in dollars with each passing year. So if you extend the incumbent Robert Saleh, I would estimate that would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 3 to 4 years at somewhere in the vicinity of $10 million per season. If you were to hire a different head coach, and if that head coach were to be a first-time coach, you're probably talking about someone who comes in at, say, 7 to 8 million per year over 4 years. Now let's be real. Do you really think Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career is going to work well with a first-time head coach? Is that going to go smoothly? He had arguably two of his best seasons with Matt LaFleur, who I think we can say had more than proven his bona fides, and Rodgers still forced his way out of Green Bay. I say zero chance, if it got to that point, that a new head coach for the Jets would be a rookie head coach. And I'm willing to bet most of you would agree as well. So then that puts the Jets organization in a position of having to hire a head coach who is not a first-time head coach, who they will most likely be paying for multiple years beyond Aaron Rodgers' tenure. Remember, coaches' contracts are guaranteed. So if you hire a head coach at, say, 4 years for $50 million, somewhere in that range, if it's a Rodgers-influenced hire, that money is owed to that coach, whether he is your coach for the full 4 years or not. Now, there is offset language and things change if that coach gets another job, but the point is you have to go into the transaction committing to that amount. That is a lot of money to commit to someone who at best would be a good fit with the aging quarterback you traded for and are paying a lot of money to, and at worst, someone you owe a lot of money to and potentially for multiple years after said quarterback retires, depending on, when Rodgers calls it a career. I'll close with this thought. I do not expect what we saw with Tom Brady playing at an elite level well into his 40s is going to be the norm. I do expect some guys will be able to, just to be clear, and I would consider Aaron Rodgers to be one of those players with a chance. But nothing is a lock. I don't think this was ever really talked about at the time, at least not in the national media, but I do not recall a lot of discussion around the timing of the Rodgers acquisition with regard to the head coach. Remember, Woody Johnson had success with Rex Ryan as the Jets coach. Rex Ryan took the Jets to consecutive AFC championships with Mark Sanchez at quarterback, largely because they had an awesome defense in those seasons. And even after they crashed into mediocrity in the seasons after, they still brought Rex back for one more season in 2014 after going 8-8 in 2013. The Jets then started 1-8 that 2014 season and ultimately finished 4-12. Just a complete waste of a season. They are simply not going to do that again. They are not going to bring Saleh back for a fifth season unless they believe he is their coach of the future, and in which case would be indicated by signing him to an extension. So we'll see how this plays out. I just think the Jets have a bunch of important personnel and money decisions to make in the next 8 to 10 months that could go in a number of different directions. For now, the Jets go into this season with a fully healthy Aaron Rodgers and should be able to compete for the division. As we wrap up, I think it's fair to say we'll be talking a lot of Jets this season, given the historical incompetence of the organization and Rodgers' penchant for the headlines. Something tells me this could be a, Dallas Cowboys-esque, in terms of the media coverage, as long as Rodgers stays healthy this season. I mean, if we saw him as much as we did last year when he wasn't even playing, imagine what this year is going to look like. Thank you all for listening. Talk soon.